Right, I'm back
We've got
now.
to restore English as the number one language in New Zealand, and it's got to be the language that everybody can use. You know, foreign students coming here now are being required to learn Te Reo, and they're not even going to come here. You know why? Because when you go back to Asia or Japan or India, what good is Te Reo to you? They want to learn English because it's the international language of the world. True? Yes. So what the hell are we doing wasting our time with that? Okay, so that's apartheid. Now what about this for dock land? Transfer ownership and control of the entire conservation strait to tribal authorities. They're going to give everything back to all dock land's going to go to iwi. The Department of Conservation has now formed an options development group. This group made a recommendation to give full.
Hello, I'm back. Welcome to the video. We've got into part 2 now, talking about the Treaty Waitangi. I'm going to have a look outside and see what's happening as well. Yeah. Here's his wagon, look at that. How's it going, Kyle?
What are you doing?
Hey, live video.
Hey? Live video.
All the activists are starting to die down now. It's getting a bit cold out here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I remember 3 of them straight away after having their head. Shut up, man.
Hey, Devon,
Yeah, man. Dude, I got like on some TV interview earlier tonight.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
With, was that Tahu or Tahi TV or some shit?
I don't know.
Some,
They'll be for co-governance then.
no.
Oh, no.
They're actually like unbiased and wanted people to have opinions and shit.
Oh, good.
And they got, they asked me and goes, oh, do you want to talk? I was like, okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And and then I got Lincoln on it as well.
Good
So,
on you.
you know.
I'm gonna go back in there and find out what's going on in here. It's a touchy subject, but like I said before, this is all about the divide and conquer. We need to be looking back at the principles and fundamental teachings of the Bible, and I'm going to be pushing this very hard from now on because that is the way it goes. We've had it every 50 years or so. There's been a massive revival of Jesus. If I can get back in, that is. Yeah, here we go. I'll turn it around.
We had a mother who came into one of my meetings, and she said, my 10-year-old son came home and said, I don't want to be a white person anymore, I want to be married. She said, why? She said, because they're getting treated differently in the classroom, they're getting favoured. And she said, we did so many terrible things to Maori, mate, we need to say sorry. You know what's happened? New Zealand has been marinating in guilt and shame that has been created, manufactured by the people pushing this, and guilt and shame are powerful mechanisms to disempower people so that you can take over a country with no opposition. And they call you, the big one is, you're a racist. And so what happens is, most Kiwis go, I don't want to be a racist. And so they back off, back down, and they give up. They just withdraw like a crab going into its shell. And that crab goes into its shell, and they don't come out again. That's what they want. They want no opposition to all this. So when people call me a racist, I just laugh and carry on. Teaching racial bias. Teaching primary school children without Maori ancestry to feel ashamed. Do you know what? This is much more. I put on this is apartheid, but look at this. I reckon it's much more. This is child abuse. Don't pick on little kids. Little children, I'm a school teacher. Little children, they just drink in whatever's said, thinking it's true. And so you're abusing these little kids in class. This is abuse. Grooming the population, getting it ready for tribal rule, a new history curriculum, street signs in Maori. That has nothing to do with preserving Maori language. This is all grooming. Country name change from New Zealand to Aotearoa. Increasing use of Maori language in all government documents. Increasing compulsory, what they call cultural safety courses being run in non-government businesses such as real estate agents. Increasing the use of Maori language in all media. compulsory cultural safety courses now being run in government departments like hospitals, the police and DOC. This is up there with 1920s and 1930s Germany. Very well it is. I won't speak any Maori language. We've got Maori here tonight, but you'll understand why. I don't speak any Maori. And the reason is, I don't want, no, it's my personal choice. I don't want anybody messing with my head. If there wasn't this ideological drive underpinning the Maorification of New Zealand, I would learn Maori. But if they want my brain for ideological purposes, I'm not joining in. Health. Two healthcare systems, a Maori healthcare system, funded by the taxpayer, decision-making and veto rights over the entire health system. That means that you might have two health systems, but Maori have the final say over our one. Maori patients prioritise. I've got two friends who are Maori. They're in their 50s. One's got mental health issues. It's actually twins. One's got mental health issues, and the other one hasn't. Well, the one who hasn't took the one who had up to a hospital, and they were filling out some forms, and the nurse was asking questions. They said, "What ethnicity are you?" And they said, "Maori." And the nurse said, "Stopped." And she said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "What do you mean? Come here for help." She said, "No, you should go to the Maori Health Authority, mate. You get picked up on a taxi, driven home with a taxi, and you get a $200 food voucher." I'm serious. I'm serious. This is apartheid. What about this? Justice. Here's the justice. Two justice systems. A Maori court system where offenders with Maori ancestry will be treated differently from other offenders. Two jail systems. Maori jails where inmates with a Maori ancestry will be treated differently from other inmates. Western common law replaced by tikanga, that's Maori customs and practices. People of Maori ancestry will have greater legal rights. It's apartheid. You know, who was the country in the world that was fighting apartheid in the 1970s and 80s? We were. We said this, you have one little smidgen of apartheid in your country and we're not going to let your sports teams come here. We were the leaders in the world. Now, we're the people promoting it. We're the people spawning it. We're the people putting it on display for the whole world to see. This has got to be stopped. What does it mean for water? Granting Maori rights to all fresh water. You know what? Water comes from the sky. It belongs to everybody. Yes. True? It belongs to everybody. Yes. Right?
Tell Auckland that.
Pardon?
Tell Auckland that their water is privatised, so actually it already belongs to someone else.
I don't get your argument, sorry.
Of course you do.
Councils pay Maori for water. Water costs and rates will go up. Giving Maori funding to cover all legal costs to claim the seabed and foreshore from mean high tide up to 12 nautical miles. Get the whole coastline around New Zealand. Opponents to Maori must now find their own legal costs. That's apartheid. What about local council? Iwi have decision making and veto rights. The abolition of the right of local communities to hold a binding referendum on Maori ward seats. Remember that? They were going to introduce Maori ward seats, just appointing Maori onto councils. Remember that? And all the people said, "No, we should have a referendum about this. This is serious. This is like a constitutional change." And Mahuta cut them off and said, "No referendums now." You know what that was? That was a move from democracy to it was a move from democracy to Maori dictatorship. In other words, Mahuta was saying, "You'll do what you're told. I don't care about the people. This is what we're doing." That's what Kim Jong-un does. Xi Jinping does that. They just couldn't care a crap about the people. Mahuta has got that. She was a Maori dictator. Local government minister Mahuta is now undertaking a review, and it appears likely to lead to 50% of the council seats being held by Maori. And if they get 50%, then they are going to have the final say of what goes on in your council, because they have the veto. They always put the veto in. We had a meeting cancelled in Hamilton 2 hours before it was about to take place. And we got this notice saying, "You can't have your meeting because it's too dangerous. Osh, your meetings are too dangerous." And they quoted, "It could be guns and knives and flying objects at your meeting." Maybe a cream bun. Because the guy has pinched off somebody else. But yeah, seriously, they called her off. And then the CEO said, oh, you know, it came from him. And we had lots of correspondence and stuff and everything. He was wearing a bone around his neck and all this sort of stuff. Oh, he just woke. Anyway, what happened was that a month later, a Maori guy inside the council, an unelected Maori councillor, put a Facebook post on and said, I got that meeting cancelled. And he was sitting at his desk smiling. And it was him who did it. He put weight on the CEO to have it cancelled. And the reason was, he didn't like what Julian Batchelor was saying. Cancel it. This is dictatorship. No free speech. Is apartheid? Well, I want to know this. We're into the treaty. Is this all legal, constitutional, what's going on here? Do we give it a tick, or is this a coup? Well, to answer these questions, we have to go right back to the Treaty of Waitangi, which has become, rightly or wrongly, our country's founding document. So, I wish the protesters had stayed for this, because this is the guts of the problem of New Zealand. Here are the main players in the treaty. Lord Normanby, very close to the Queen, very powerful, and he sent Hobson via the Queen to New Zealand. Hobson is an accomplished, by the way, this guy is called Secretary of the Colonies. He's a bit like Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State. He was Secretary of the Colonies, and he's in the Queen's inner circle. Hobson was an accomplished sea captain. In the 1820s, he was fighting the pirates in the Caribbean. In the 1830s, he was going in and out of the West Indies. He got yellow fever 3 times. He was weak. He was weakened by that physically, but he was very strong in the mind and his emotions. And he was selected by the Queen, through the advice of Lord Normanby, to come to New Zealand. Then you have this guy here, who's called Busby. We're talking about, this is 1840, just so if people don't know. This is 1840 for those two. This guy here, Busby, had arrived in New Zealand in 1833, so he'd been here 7 years. When the treaty member was 1840, so he came here 1833, so he was 7 years here. And he came really, off his own bat really, to try and sort out warring Ngāpuhi chiefs in Northland. And he was the guy that put together the 1835 Declaration of Independence. I've written a paper on this. Didn't go anywhere. They never met after the first meeting, and by 1838, the tribes were fighting again. Which is why this happened. And then you have Freeman, who was given to Hobson en route to New Zealand. They stopped off in Sydney. And you know when an employer wants to unload a bad employee on somebody else? Well, Freeman was like dead weight. And Governor Gibbs in Australia wanted to unload him and get him off his staff, and so he gave him to Hobson. And this guy was sacked from the treaty writing process. And then you have Glendon, who was also a British, he was a British subject, but he was actually the US consul here, because America had interest, this is 1840, America had interest in New Zealand, flax, whaling, sealing. And so he was reporting to him from the American government, letting them know what was going on in New Zealand. He was a very important guy in the treaty process. And then you have the hero of the treaty, a guy called Henry Williams. He looks a bit tired there. But Henry Williams had been here since New Zealand since 1823. He was a CMS missionary. CMS means Church Missionary Society. He was loved by Maori and was a very, very successful missionary. Many Maori came to know Christ through him, and he was fluent in Te Reo. He was the guy who translated the treaty from the final English draft into Maori. He and his son, Edward. Then you have this guy here, not well known. This is Reverend Taylor. Not many people know him, but he had an important job. On the 5th of February, in the evening, Hobson ordered him to transfer the treaty, which was written on paper, into Maori, onto dogskin. So this guy transferred, it was written by him on paper on the 4th, and then he had to put it on dogskin on the 5th, ready for the signing on the 6th. And then we have this guy called Colenso, who was extremely important, because he was the official British printer, he had a printing shop in Paihia, And he printed on the 17th of February 200 copies of the treaty in Maori, which the British officials, with using missionaries, went around New Zealand and gathered signatures of other chiefs that did not sign at Waitangi. But he had a more important job than that. He was known for his accuracy in note-taking, his meticulous accuracy, and he was the guy in the tent with the chiefs at Waitangi on the 5th and 6th of February taking notes. And we have those notes. And I'm going to show you some of the notes in a minute. So that's kind of the main players. Now, this is the most important slide of the whole evening, because this was about Lord Normanby's instructions via the Queen of England, the most powerful ruler in the world, to Hobson. Hobson left New Zealand on the 25th of August 1839 from England, but he was given a 4,200 word document which were instructions from the Queen via him, Normanby, about what the Queen was expecting in New Zealand. Now that document was dated the 14th of August 1839. They left on the 25th. That means that there was 11 days between the writing of the document, the date on it, and Hobson's leaving. What went on in those 11 days? Normanby was one-on-one with Hobson, making it clear that he's got to obey the Queen. And so you have Lord Normanby's instructions to Hobson, and this is what it said. The Queen disclaims every pretension to seize the islands of New Zealand. Now, stop there. You say there's not much in that. Yes, there's a lot in that. International law at this time allowed for countries that were colonising to simply go into another country, wipe out all the native people with guns and ships, and simply put up a flag and say it's your new colony. That is how Britain used to colonise. But in the late 1830s, Britain was experiencing a Christian revival, and the Queen was caught up in this. There was prison reform, and the government. There was prison reform. They changed the rules about the death penalty. There was child labour reform. Children were no longer going to be working in factories all hours in terrible conditions for no wages, starving. And the big one was the abolition of the slave trade in 1838. This all came about as a result of Christianity sweeping through Britain in the late 1830s. William Wilberforce was the force behind the slave trade, and he was a Christian. And this movement was led by some people called the evangelicals. And the Queen was caught in this. And she changed the colonisation policy of Britain from one of being a warmonger to being a what they call humanitarian colonisation. So she says this: the Queen disclaims every pretension to seize the islands of New Zealand. They used to just seize them, go in and take them, wipe out everybody out, put a flag up and say that's our new land. She says we're not going to do that. Well, what's she going to do? This is the new Christianised humanitarian Queen. She says this: unless the free intelligent consent of the natives expressed according to their established usages shall first be obtained. The Queen says we're not just going to seize New Zealand. In fact, we're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to come into New Zealand, we're going to get the free intelligent consent of the natives, the Maori. She said to Normanby, make sure you get the free intelligent consent of Maori for what you're about to do. Oh, that's completely radical. Normanby would have gone, yes, ma'am. But he was thinking, man, this is off the charts. It's not how we do stuff. But that's what she wanted. You will therefore frankly and unreservedly explain the reasons which should urge them to acquiesce. Now you remember, she says this: this is Hobson, you will therefore frankly and unreservedly explain the reasons which should urge them to acquiesce. In other words, come around to what you want. Maori wanted what? They want a protection from who? Themselves and the French. You will therefore frankly and unreservedly explain the reasons which should urge them to acquiesce. In other words, it's something we want. Now here's the critical thing in the whole seminar tonight. Something we've got to get. That is this. Come on. And the impossibility of Her Majesty extending to them any effectual protection unless the Queen be acknowledged as the sovereign of the country. She said this, Hobson, through Normandy, if you don't get sovereignty, go no further in New Zealand. Pull out. You're going to get the free intelligent consent, you're not going to take the land. In fact, the Queen said, Maori, we're going to say Maori owned the land and we'll buy it off them. It's not how she operated before. They just went and took it. But she says it's impossible for Britain to go any further in New Zealand unless, look that word, impossibility. It's impossible. That means impossible. So, here is Waitangi today. That's Busby's house, being restored, of course. I want to be clear about a couple of things. There's only one treaty, not multiple treaties. A lot of people say, well, which treaty to it? No. There's only one treaty, and that's the Treaty in Maori. That's the treaty I want to get the whole of New Zealand back to. Because if we got back to that treaty, we'd have a beautiful country. We'd have none of the stuff going on today. I'm all for this treaty. I'm for this treaty being interpreted as it was originally intended, and that's the purpose of the next hour for you and I together. I want to show you what was originally intended. So let's go back to the original meaning. International law dictates that the Treaty in Maori takes precedence over everything else written in English. Now, at the moment, the government is breaking the law with respect to the treaty because they're not using the Maori Treaty. And I'm going to put this up on the board for you here. Hopefully you can all see it. Here's the treaty, here's the Waitangi Tribunal. Here. Right. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the 11th of April 1840, this is nearly 2 months after the treaty was signed at Waitangi. That was the 6th of February, so it's February, March, April, 11th of April. A missionary called Morsel was sent by Hobson to get signatures from chiefs at Waikato Heads. Now remember I told you that Freeman was sacked from the treaty process. Well, and that he was a liability to the British. Well, he started writing, this is Freeman, he started writing treaties in what was called royal language, flowery language. And that was why he was sacked by Hobson, because Hobson said, we have to have a treaty that's easy for Maori to understand. And Freeman said, no, I like my royal style. Well, Morsel went to the Waikato Heads to get signatures of chiefs. And when he arrived there, he had a copy of the treaty in Maori that was printed by Colenso on the 17th of February 1840, and he was waiting for the dogskin treaty to arrive, but it didn't. Now, in his top pocket, Morsel had one of Freeman's rogue treaties, royal style. So many chiefs turned up that day that Morsel didn't have enough room on the Maori treaty to get all the signatures. He couldn't wait any longer for the dogskin to arrive. So what he did, because he thought, if I lose these Maori chiefs, they'll just melt back into the bush and I won't get their signatures. So what he did is go out of his top pocket this rogue James Freeman version of the treaty, and he used it to get signatures of the chiefs at Waikato Heads. Those two bits of paper, the treaty in Maori, which was the one read to the chiefs, they thought they were signing that one, and the rogue James Freeman version were wax sealed together. They were taken back to base, okay, and Hobson actually signed that. Now, He signed the James Freeman one. I'll tell you why he signed it. Because he was just verifying or making bonafide the fact that those signatures were genuine from the chiefs, not what was written on the front of it. Maori activists got hold of that because it mentions forests and fisheries. The treaty in Maori does not. But activists got that and said, we'll have that one because we get the forests and all the fisheries. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Now look, hang on to this, because they make a big deal of this. This is the James Freeman Road Treaty. It's been used by the Waitangi Tribunal. Okay. Now, international law, as I said, states that the treaty in Maori should take precedence over that which is written in English. But no. This Maori treaty makes no mention of forests and fisheries. That one does. So they hang on to it, the tribunal, which is now run by activists. So, the treaty makes no mention of partnership or co-governance. Let me show you. I'm going to explain what happened. Here we go. This is Busby. Now they had to get the chiefs to Waitangi, so what they do? They sent out an invitation. And this is what the invitation says, and I love this. It says this: a warship, this is what the chiefs were given. A warship has arrived with a chief on board, sent by the Queen of England to be the governor for us both. Who was the chief on board? Hobson. And a warship. This appealed to Mara. Remember, they love war. There's a massive big ship with guns poking out and a big chief on board. That would have been fascinating. All the chiefs, many they could not all, made their way to Waitangi. Well, here are the main players as I explain what happened. Remember I told you that Hobson left England on the 25th of August 1839 and he went to Sydney. Now, he left Sydney on HMS Herald, the ship, on the 19th of January 1840. They arrived in Paihia on the 29th of January. That's 10 days it took to sail from Sydney to New Zealand. And they weighed anchor in Paihia. Now, how many days in January? 31. When was this treaty signed? 6th of February. That's 6 and 3 is 9. If you arrive on the 29th and there's 31 days in January, that's 3 days, plus 6 in January, you've got 9 days to get this treaty together. Well, these guys, Hobson, Freeman, Cleandon, Busby and Williams met at his home. And they would have exchanged some formalities because he was the British resident, but he now took over as the sort of supreme leader of New Zealand, of the British at this time. And he had that mandate. And then they started writing the treaty. Now these guys, Busby, Williams, Cleandon, Freeman and Hobson, wrote furiously on the 29th, 30th and 31st. But on the 1st of February, they had 8 pages of notes. And Hobson had a furious row with the captain of his ship. He was called Nias, N-I-A-S. And remember I told you that Hobson had been weakened by yellow fever. He had 3 bouts of it in the West Indies. Well, he was put in bed by this row, and Busby heard about it, and he sent word to Hobson and says, Hobson, can I carry on? Would you like me to carry on writing a treaty on my own? Hobson says that would be great. So on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of February, remember it was signed on the 6th, this guy was writing a treaty on his own. On the evening of the 3rd of February, he had a clean draft to show Hobson. Hobson must have been well enough because on the 4th of February he came ashore and he met in Cleandon's home. This is getting really interesting, so stay with me. On the 4th of February, Hobson, Cleandon, he was sacked, he wasn't there. Hobson, Cleandon, Busby and Williams met in his home and they went over Busby's final draft. What do you think was on their mind? obviously, were being the Queen's instruction, 4,200 word instruction from the Queen via military. Have we got this right? Is this exactly what the Queen wanted? We can't stuff this up. 4 o'clock on that day, the 4th of February, the final English draft was signed off by those men. Hobson, Camden, Husky and Williams. He had the final say. And so we put it up here that we have the final English draft, and I'll put the corrupt stuff on this side, put the good stuff on this side. We have here on the 4th of February the treaty in English, the final draft. When was it finished? 4 o'clock. What day? The 4th. It's given to this guy. It's given to him, who's been here, I told you, since 1823, 17 years, working with Maori, fluent in Te Reo, and he's called Henry Williams and his son Edward. They were given that, and Hobson ordered them to turn this into Maori overnight. Well, early morning on the 5th, 7 o'clock, getting close now, the treaty was signed on the 6th, on the morning of the 5th. The chiefs are all in the tent. They've all come to see this governor, this chief on a warship, who's going to be governor for both of us. Hobson, Cleveland, Busby and Williams met in his house. Now, we know that the final English draft from which the Maori Treaty was written in his house because it was on W. Tucker 1833 watermark paper. That paper, that one there, is in W. Tucker 1833 watermark paper. He didn't have that paper, he didn't have that paper, he didn't have it. Hobson didn't bring it, Taylor didn't have it, nobody had it except him. So we know that the final English draft was written in Cleveland's home. He translates it on the morning of the 5th, the guys get together, and they would have been so reliant on him. Because Hobson can't speak Maori, so what's he going to be saying? He's going to be saying this: Williams, are you sure you've got Kawanatanga right, the Maori word for sovereignty? Are you sure you've got Tino Rangitirotanga, the Maori word for possession? Are you sure? Because we can't go back. Well, 12 o'clock on the 5th, these guys decided that they were ready to go to the tent where the chiefs were waiting. I looked at them there. The Union Jack was on the table, there was flags everywhere, and they were going to see the chief who had come on a warship. And he entered that tent with all his regalia on. I reckon Maori eyes would have been popping out of their heads. He made a speech, which was translated by Williams, and then they read the treaty in English. This is on the 5th, this is not the 6th. They read the treaty in English, and then they read it in Maori, and then questions were asked by Maori about the treaty. It's not very long, it's only 3 paragraphs, plus a preamble. And then the chief's speeches started, because Maori love to stand up and say stuff. Do they? They do. And so, this is what the chiefs actually said on February the 5th in that tent recorded by Colenso. You've got to really pay attention to this because this is crucial. Te Kemera was the first speaker. He was chief of the Ngāti Kawa tribe. He said this: "Health to thee, O Governor. I'm not pleased towards thee. In other words, I don't like your treaty. I shall never say yes to your staying. I don't like your treaty. Were we to be in equality," you'll notice Colenso actually says what the chief said, not he didn't correct them. He really meant were we to be equal, but Te Kemera said equality, so being a good scribe, he wrote down exactly what the chief said. Were we to be in equality, then perhaps Te Kemera would say yes, he'd like that he would go with the treaty. But for the governor to be up and Te Kemera to be down, Governor high, up, and Takemura down low, small, a worm, a crawler. No, Governor. I love it. What's that? That's sovereignty talk, isn't it? Did he want to know, was that clear that he knew what sovereignty meant? Watch this, watch the next one. Look at this dude here. This is Teraha of the Ngāti Rehia said this. No governor for me, for us, native men. We only are the chiefs, the rulers. We will not be ruled over. What? Thou a foreigner up and I down? Thou high and I, Teraha, the great chief of the Ngāpuhi tribes low? No. Never. Now the fact for me that you had a group of people meeting in a tent and some of them did not agree and did not want to sign the treaty signifies that what happened in that tent that day was authentic. Yes or no?
Yes.
It does. Tehuhu refused to sign, his reason being that it would place the mana of Tehuhu beneath the feet of a woman. He said, man, I'm not coming under a woman. A queen? I know a few guys in Christchurch like that. That Maori present at Waitangi understood what was meant by Kawanatanga is evident from the remark of one chief that if Kawanatanga is the Maori word for sovereignty, got that? Is evident from the remark of one chief that if Kawanatanga was ceded, he would thereafter have to ask the permission of the British authorities to paddle his canoe across the river. Everything's referenced. This is what Henry Williams said, which is huge and important. Henry Williams reported to Bishop Selwyn, he said this: the instruction of Captain Hobson was not to allow any to sign the treaty until he first understood it, to which instruction I did most strictly attend. That the natives to whom I explained the treaty understood the nature of the same, there can be no doubt. There was no doubt. On the evening of the 5th of February, after speeches were made in the afternoon of the 5th, in the evening, Maori chiefs left that tent and they went up to TTE Marae to further discuss the treaty, and Williams went with them, father and son, to go over anything they didn't understand the whole night, the 3 paragraphs. Well, that night, on the evening of the 5th, we know that we have this. Remember that the treaty was in paper to start with in Maori. That's what they read in the tent of the 5th. But on the evening of the 5th, who was the guy that transferred it off paper onto dogskin? What was his name? No, it wasn't Cleanzo. Who was it? Sorry? No, stop guessing. Who was it? Reverend? Taylor. Taylor was ordered to put it onto dogskin on the night of the 5th. Now, on the morning of the 6th, Hobson had thought that Maori would take a whole week to get ready to sign. But to his great surprise, on the morning of the 6th, all the chiefs came out of Marae back into the tent. They came down from TTE Marae down into the tent, and they said, we're ready to sign. Who was the first Maori to sign? Haihiki. The biggest, baddest warmonger, and he signed. Now some of the chiefs didn't sign on this day, but many did. Now this is where it gets extremely interesting. By the way, those who didn't sign eventually did sign, and 540 chiefs around New Zealand eventually signed the Treaty of Waitangi. 39 signed at the Waikato Heads on the James Freeman version, but that was the only English version that was signed. Doesn't that give you a red flag? Come on, everybody else signed the Maori. was the US Council. On the 20th of February, that's 14 days or 2 weeks after the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, he made a copy of the final English draft to send back to America. He fixed the spelling mistakes in Busby's final draft. Busby wrote this, remember? It was written on W. Tucker, 1833 watermark paper. On the 20th of February, Clendon made a copy of this to send back to America. We have it. It's exactly the same as this, which is the one written by Busby and signed off by all those other Hobson. We have that in America on microfiche. Then on the 28th of February, a US explorer, Antarctic explorer, came to New Zealand and he wanted to see the Treaty of Waitangi in English. He made a copy of it, sent it back to America. And he also recorded this treaty in the logbook of the ship. So there's 3 copies. Treaty in English. And they're all perfectly matching. After about the 5th of April, 1840, Clendon gave the final English draft to a lawyer called Henry Littlewood. And Henry Littlewood was a lawyer in Paihia. And he said to Littlewood, store this away because I think we've pretty much done with it now. We've got the treaties in Maori, they've all been printed by Colenso. We've got it on dogskin. We're all ready to go. I've done my duty sending it back to America. The final English draft, keeping them up to date. Littlewood, take this treaty like this. Look. Take this final English draft and store it for me. Well, do you know what? This final English draft was lost until 1989. When relatives of Henry Littlewood were cleaning out the deceased estate in Pukekohe in Auckland, and they pulled out some sheets from a linen cupboard, and onto the floor fell an envelope with the Treaty of Waitangi written on the back. They opened it, and inside was that. It was the final English draft. Forensic analysis said this was the final English draft because it was written on the W. Tucker 8333 watermark paper, and this has been forensically analysed to say this was Busby's handwriting, and we know that Busby was the one who wrote it was him who actually penned the final English draft. Now, the relatives took a photo of it, thankfully. They gave it to the local MP. This was 1989. The local MP said, you need to take this to Archives New Zealand, this could be hugely valuable. They took some photos, and then they were told to get it to Parliament as quickly as possible. And when it got to Parliament, they were told to get it out of sight as fast as possible. Why? Because it did not mention forests and fisheries. It's called the Littlewood Draft. Of crucial importance is this final draft. After making a copy of it to send to his superiors in the USA, and after the Williams had finished with it, Clendon gave it the final draft to his lawyer Henry Williams. It was lost until 1989 when it was found in the house of the relatives of Henry Littlewood in Pukekohe. For political reasons and under pressure from activists, this draft has been hidden away out of public sight. It matches the Maori version almost perfectly. What are the differences between this and this? There's only 2 differences. One is the date. What date's this? 4th. What date's this? So that's one difference. The only other difference is in Article 3 of the treaty, Hobson and Williams and Cleveland stuck in the word Maori in Article 3 of the treaty in this one. That otherwise they're a mirror image. The Rogue James Freeman version has literally dozens of differences, but they're sticking with that. It's wrong. It makes no mention of forest and fisheries. Why is it being hidden out of sight? Because it threatened to end the gravy trade. There'll be no more fisheries, no more forests for Maori. They probably have to give it all back. The beaches would belong to everybody. Now, here's the preamble. Here's the preamble, by the way. I want to get you good on the treaty. What date's this? What date's this? Who said this? 6th? 4th, 5th, 6th. Say it with me. 4th, 5th, 6th. Who wrote this one? Busby. Who wrote this one? Williams. Father and son, the missionaries. Who wrote this one? Taylor. So we've got Busby, Williams, Taylor. 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now, here's the preamble to the treaty, which tells you what was in the minds of the British when they put this together. Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Queen of England, in her gracious, stop there. Her gracious, she's no longer a warmonger, she's going to be gracious to Maori. In her gracious consideration of the chiefs and the people of New Zealand, and her desire to preserve them their land, stop there. Look at this, this is radical. She says, Maori, we're going to let them keep their land. We're going to buy off them. All the land in New Zealand belongs to Maori. This is not how Queen used to do colonisation. And to maintain peace and order among them, in other words, we're going to let them have their land, we're going to be gracious to them, we're going to say you own it, we're not going to just come and seize it. We're going to get the free, intelligent consent of Maori, and we're going to set up peace and order among them, which is what they wanted from us. Has been pleased to appoint an officer to treat them with them for the cession of their sovereignty of their country and of the islands adjacent to the Queen. So she gets on to what she wants now. Seeing that already many of Her Majesty's subjects have already settled in the country, that is, British people are coming to New Zealand and are constantly arriving because they're making a new life here in New Zealand, and that is desirable for their protection, as well as the protection of the natives who establish a government amongst them. So she says this, we're going to set up a government, we're going to get peace and order here in New Zealand where there hasn't been any tribes fighting. We're going to be gracious, we're going to give Maori their land. We're going to say, Maori, you keep your land, we'll buy it from you. And we're going to set up a government. Her Majesty has accordingly been pleased to appoint me, William Hobson, a captain in the Royal Navy, to be the governor of such parts of New Zealand as may now be and hereafter be ceded in sovereignty to her, be ceded to Her Majesty, and proposes to the chiefs of the Confederation of United Tribes of New Zealand and the other chiefs to agree to the following articles. Sovereignty, sovereignty. If we get this, then we're going to let you have your land and set up a government and protect you. Well, what would the first article be about? Come on. Sovereignty. It was the big thing. It's what the Queen emphasised. The impossibility of Britain carrying on in New Zealand if they didn't get sovereignty. So you'd expect those boys to say, okay, when they were sitting around the table together, mate, what's the first one going to be? Sovereignty. And it was. Here it is. The chiefs of the Confederation of United Tribes and the other chiefs who have not joined the Confederation cede to the Queen of England forever the entire sovereignty of their country. Cede means to give up or to give somebody control. Sovereignty means government or complete power to govern a country. Does this article teach, instruct, convey the idea that Maori would be self-determined in having her own government, or the Queen enter into a partnership with Maori? Yes or no? No. Okay, so if we extrapolate out the words cede and sovereignty, this is how the Article 1 reads. Reads like this. The chiefs of the Confederation of United Tribes and the other chiefs who have not joined the Confederation give up to the Queen of England forever the entire right to govern their country. Holy moly. Who's saying they have the right to govern the country right now? No. This is rebellion. This is a massive breach of the treaty.
Sorry, Julian.
Wait.
This is a good question.
No. It's not be no time here. I'm not going to lose my flow. Put your finger down. Put your finger down. Take your mask off. Put your finger down. Put your finger down and be self-controlled. Otherwise, I'll ask you to leave. I'm going to ask you. I'll warn you once. Thank you. Don't ruin my session. Co-governance. Article 1. Impossible. Come on. Partnership. Article 1. Impossible interpretation. You just can't get that from there. Now, who backs me up?
Not me.
Who said that Maori ceded sovereignty? This is New Zealand's greatest Maori, who was an MP in the 1920s and 30s. He got a law degree in 2 years instead of 3. He had a Doctor of Literature. He sometimes stood in as a Deputy Prime Minister. He was called the Father of the House. He was enormously learned, and he spoke fluent Te Reo. He went around all the maraes in New Zealand teaching them about the treaty, because Maori were complaining in the 1920s and 30s that they had no land. And I believe what Maori were experiencing then was self remorse, because
I'm just about out of battery power, guys. It's been a big day with doing all these videos and things, so I've come back outside for a quick chat here. Whether or not how relevant this Treaty of Waitangi is or not, it doesn't matter. It's being used like a queen in a big game of chess, a chess piece, to be manipulated and thrown around the place, I think. Whereas in the end, when only one truth remains, and that is the power of God's word, where we need to come back and work together as one people, not being separated and arguing amongst each other. One people under God. One people under God. And that's how we will thrive, that's how we will survive, that's how we become gracious, supporting of each other, working together. It doesn't matter whether you're a black piece or a white piece in this big game of chess. It doesn't matter whether you're the queen being blocked by the little prawns all over the place. That's the way I see it. It comes back again to Galatians 5:15. I think it was there, where if you love your neighbour as yourself, or otherwise you're going to end up annihilating each other. I've got to sign off for now because my battery is just about flat, so thanks for watching. And remember, Kiwis are strong warriors, and we're not going to stop until we get what we want.